Hello everyone, welcome back to the Red YouTube channel for yet another episode of the Solitary series with me, Jonathan Petts. I welcome you all back. I'm just going to make sure that everything has started live and correctly on my stream. Sound off if you can hear me. Just want to make sure everything's set up and raring to go. So basically today, what we're going to be doing is looking at menu tactics. Now, what is menu tactics? So menu tactics is going to be kind of like a little mini series we're going to be doing within the Solitary series, diving into the menus and functions of a DSMC2 and Ranger camera. You know, they're fully feature packed and there's a lot of things in these cameras. And sometimes as filmmakers and content creators, we don't always have the time to dive into them and test out everything for ourselves. So for these sessions, I've gone around the Red HQ through emails, obviously with social distancing, to find out what questions they commonly get asked from our customers and what things they think our content creators should be using a little bit more. So I've got a little list that we're going to start off with today's session, and going forward, one thing we really want to do is build a collaborative preset with you guys on stream in a future session and kind of have this Solitary series kind of preset. So I'm going to dive right into everything and we'll start looking at some of the first tips. So one that I commonly find is people are always asking me about the false color modes. What do they do? What are they looking at? What are they based off? How can I use them fully in my day-to-day shooting? So it's kind of broken up into two parts. We're going to look at the exposure tools and the focus tools. And firstly, there is a number of ways to actually get into them. The first one being coming into menu, going in through overlays and into tools. So that's kind of the basic one, going in through the menus. But the reason why I've got this second camera set over here, this lovely Monstro Ranger, is that a lot of menu items are contextual through the touchscreen. So the first one to get into that menu is simply tap on the histogram. So I'll just focus on the screen here, and all you do, tap on it, and you go straight into that menu. The other one that I think a lot of people maybe aren't too familiar with is you can actually tap on the histogram and swipe up and go straight into any of the false color modes. So I'll just show you that now. So you can see that we can tap, swipe up and go straight into the video mode, straight into one of the focus modes without needing to go through any menus or tap down selection boxes. So I'll just disable that. Super quick, super intuitive. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go one by one just through these false color modes, just so you guys at home know exactly what these are doing and potentially some really unique scenarios to use them. So the first one we're going to look at is the exposure tool. Now this is working in tandem with the goalposts. So the goalposts you'll see down at the bottom of the image there, either side of the histogram. Those goalposts will basically fill up depending on how much the image may be underexposed or potentially underexposed. Now, with clipping, it's a lot more binary, as in, hey, it is overexposed or it's not overexposed. But with shadows and kind of noise, that's very much a perceptual and a personal thing. Some people may want a little bit of texture in their image. Some people may want a very clean image, depending on what they're doing. So I'll just show you what happens if I turn this off for the moment, just for those of you not familiar with DSMC2. So as I stop down, we'll see that that bar on the left-hand side is filling up and saying, hey, watch out, there may be some underexposure or some noise within your image, but it doesn't say where in the image. Same goes for overexposure. Oh, I can't clip it, I've got too much dynamic range. So come in with the flashlight and we can see, hey, that bar is starting to fill up. So where exposure tool comes into its own is by giving us an indication of where in the image we're going to be seeing some of that. Now, the green you're seeing here, that's going to be your middle gray, your green, a good point to base a lot of your exposure off. A lot of people like working from that point outwards. And as we start to stop down, we'll see we're starting to get a little bit of purple, and you'll see with that leftmost goalpost, that's starting to fill up. So they're kind of tied together. So it's starting to show us, oh, hey, actually, around these areas on the camera, there might be a little bit of noise in there, which for me, that might be perfectly fine. I'm fine with it in those locations, and vice versa. If we now open right up and do the flashlight thing again, although that's telling me, hey, there's some clipping in there, I don't need to see the detail on the LED diode. So now I'm saying, hey, you know what? I've checked my exposure mode and that's perfectly fine. But what is this based off? What data are we actually looking at here? And fundamentally, we're looking at raw data values being overlaid on top of a log image. So what I mean by that is things like your ISO will impact this. So if we back out and we go across to ISO and we both boost it up, we can see that our mid-gray and our highlights and shadows will change. But it is also working in tandem with the raw data values to give you a really good indication of, hey, if I'm clipping, the raw is going to be clipped, and hey, the shadows, you may be losing a little bit of data there. So let's dive back into them and work our way through some other ones. So video is the next one on the list. Now, you can kind of think of these as working at different points in the image pipeline. The first one, exposure, was kind of somewhat at the beginning with that log image, not quite just the raw data, but the log image. And with video, this is very much at the end of that processing pipeline. So this is being based off our 709, our lookup table, any contrast curves we may have in the camera, and being put at the end of that spectrum. And actually, I've got a little cheat sheet guide here, which I'm just going to bring up for you on the left as to what these colors mean. And this is fantastic if you're shooting very quickly. Maybe you're shooting ProRes and you're delivering that straight away to an online resource. Maybe it's going live on the internet or being sent to somebody and being uploaded. You can ensure that the Rec 709 values are there, not clipped. Your shadows are fine. Your skin tones are where you want them to be immediately on that output file. Doesn't just have to be for the ProRes. It might just be you're recording raw, slapping a 709 LUT on and delivering it, and not necessarily playing with those values. Because what these tools are designed for is to make sure you've got the thickest possible digital negative. You know, we want to ensure you've got as much data to play around with as possible when you go into that post-production phase, by ensuring you've got detail when you want it in the highlights and detail when you want it in the shadows as well. So super cool tool there. I personally don't use that too much, but I'm speaking to people like Phil Holland, and he loves using this tool as well. I will also give a little bit of a quick plug to Shane Hurlbut. He's got a in-depth live stream, I think tomorrow, where he's going through IRE values on external monitors. He's a Gemini user, so that'll be a great session for you guys to go and watch as well. I'll just come down to the geoscope here, and we'll come back to the focus ones after. And this is one of my favorite tools, and one that I've been using a considerable amount when I've been going out doing camera tests and doing some of my own shooting. So what the geoscope is you can kind of think of it like the zone system. It's not the zone system, but those of you familiar with it can kind of start to get comfy, and you'll probably find this one really easy to pick up. And what it's doing is, we can see we've got 1 to 16 there, and that's a representation of our dynamic range of the sensor, and each stop being an increment in light. So firstly, this is a really great way to see our highlights, our shadows, and our midtones, but also the contrast values between them. And this is where it starts to get really exciting. So for example, when you're lighting a green screen, you may typically want a 2-stop difference between your subject and the green screen. So with this, we can come in and we can go, hey, I'm going to expose my talent to this 12th stop, one above middle gray, which is that 11. So 11 is going to be your 18% mid gray. I'm going to expose my talent to that 12th stop, and then I want to have 2 stops over for my green screen. Oh, and actually, coincidentally, my wall is 2 stops above where my skin tone's sitting. So that's working really well. One other use case for this, when we're working on dark crystal, we had a lot of puppets, prosthetics, and different skin tones in all of these puppets and animatronics. Now, some of the creatures had, very blue skin tones, very deep skin, and that absorbed a lot of light. Whereas we had some characters in the show that were very reflective, slightly glossier, which reflected more light. So maybe certain creatures would be at this 13th stop, and some might be a little bit lower because they're reflecting a little bit more light. But obviously, this is also relevant for human flesh tones as well. You may have different talent with different kinds of skin tones and flesh tones. Maybe you are getting some spray down with some water. It's a rain scene, and the actor's skin is reflecting a little bit more light. You can kind of come in and go, oh, well, I'm going to bring this down to this 9th stop. Maybe we've got an actor with some prosthetics, maybe some scars on, and as a result, I need to ping a little bit more light into them. You can start to build these really cool systems of working to ensure you're getting that thickest possible digital negative. And one thing I will say, this is based off the raw data values. So it's not taking into account things like ISO. So you can move and adjust those as you will, and it won't make an impact. So, this is probably the best tool for judging, hey, overexposure, underexposure, where am I sitting? Is my skin tones where I want it? Now, obviously, I implore you to do your own tests in terms of where you're happy on the lower end, or are you happy with kind of going into this third and second stop, if you want that little bit of a filmic texture in the shadows, or maybe not. It's completely subjective. And people can use combinations of these tools as well. There's nothing saying you have to use this tool. There's so many ways to work with the camera, to work with the way that you want to work. We're not kind of shoehorning you into one way of working. One last little note on geoscope in terms of the highlights. This 16th stop is going red, but it's broken up into 1/8 increments. So I'll just get the trusty flashlight out again, and you'll see that when we clip, the indicator will come on, but we're actually seeing black. So you can see as I bring that in, we can see our rightmost goalpost is coming on and starting to fill up, and it's going black. So we go from red, and through 1/8 increments, we eventually go from red to black. So it's a little tip there. And now we'll quickly just go through some of the focus tools. So focus tools, obviously pretty obvious in what they're there to help us do. They're there to help us ensure that our image is staying in focus. Some of them do different overlays and different looks, so I'll just spin through those now. Focus is obviously showing us our colored image with the correct contrast and output, but just overlaying some slightly sharper edges on the area that you're in focus. So this is great if you still want to get an idea of what's going on in your scene, but then just have a guide of assisting you with that focus. This is a bit of a contrast to the edge, which is going to be quite a substantial change. And I personally like using this whenever I'm by myself shooting on Monstro with these lovely Supreme Primes that go open to T1.5. It's a pretty hard task for even a high-end AC, and even more of a task for me not being a high-end AC. So this is a tool that I really like to have just to give me an indication of kind of where I am in focus. And the final one, and obviously the most popular one that AECs that I've always worked with use, is the focus peaking, which still gives us the look of our image, but overlays a nice red overlay just to give us a bit of perspective on where our focus is kind of sitting. One little thing that I'll mention here that I have seen catch a few people out and has freaked out a few producers is kind of thinking about that plumbing and piping again. Where is this image going out to? So by going into image and monitors, under HDSTI, which is where I may be having my producer feed going out to, just ensure you've disabled tools so any of these changes don't go out to them, and you might hear some screams coming from Video Village. But then you can see in HDMI, I've got tools coming out because that's the feed I'm using to stream to you guys. So just something to consider when you're setting up these tools. So let's just back out there, and I'll go turn off that overlay. And that kind of summarizes some of the false color modes, which leads me very nicely. Oh, just seen a few comments in terms of changing colors. So you can't change the colors of the exposure, the geoscope, or the false color. So it's just red, and then the different colors assigned for the geoscope, and then the red and the purple and the green for the exposure tool. One of the comments that, having spoken to our support team, so Al Ward over here in the UK, he told me that a lot of people are asking him about the magnify tool and how they can move the magnify box to an area in the frame to assist them. And typically what we'll see when I go to magnify is that it punches in right in the middle of the screen. And what's happening is, differing to a lot of external monitors that have a magnify tool, is they're receiving a downsampled image. So they're kind of working with like an HD or a 2K kind of image and zooming in on that. What's happening in camera, and why it takes a moment to kind of punch in, is we're skipping that downsampling step, and it's debayering down to that one-to-one image with the hopes of giving you a higher quality image to start gauging your focus off of. And that's why we can't quite move it around, because otherwise we have to re-debayer all of those quadrants. But what we can do is choose the position we want to zoom into, and I'll show you that now. So we're going to kind of use another feature in the camera to achieve this. So if we come out, we go to Settings, Focus, and when we're in here, we just go to the Confirm mode. We're going to set our zone to spot, our size to small, and when we back out, we will see that we've now got this rectangle that will go some different colors based on where it thinks the focus is. But we're not going to use it for that. We're going to use it for the ability to move where our focus is. Now, in terms of the touch screen, so I'm just going to stop the touch screen down so we can see what's going on. And at this point, you can now touch the little red square and move it to where on the image you want to be getting your punch-in magnifier. So I'll just do that now. So you can see there, I tapped it with my finger, dragged it over, and now we're zooming in on the area that I wanted to bring up in focus. Same goes for if we're using a side handle. So I'm using one of our side handles to operate the menus through this DSMC2 Gemini. I'm just going to come in and disable focus assist so it's not too confusing. And all we do is we simply go into the menu, we tap down, and we get this positional box, and we can then move that around wherever we want it to go on the screen if you don't want to have it go through the touch screen, or maybe you're not even using a touch screen. So I can come up, I can come over to the Ranger section, we can then punch in, and there we go. We're zooming in, making sure that Ranger logo is nice and in focus. I saw somebody spotted my little dark crystal Easter egg. Well done, Brad. I think there'll be a prize for you there. This is going to now lead me on to my next step. We're going to try and rattle through some of these. The next one is one that was suggested to me by Lauren, who works here at Red, who has been handling a lot of our Behind the Look series. And what's super cool about his tip is it's a way of, whenever you mount a card, to have it request to be auto formatted. Now, this is really cool because I wasn't aware of this. And when he told me this tip, I've been using it. And what it's really cool for is whenever an AC mounts a card, they can be assured that that card is ready to go by the dialog box for the format to come up. And a second benefit of this is it's reducing the write cycles on the SSD inside, so that we're not doing it on the laptop or the desktop and then again in the camera. Johnny, can you go over through the focal point again? I can go through the zooming again at the end when we have the questions. I don't want to reiterate too much there. So I've got a card here, and to go through setting this up, I'm going to switch back to my desktop view where I've already got a card mounted. So I'm going to open up my card here. Now, obviously, you're going to want to ensure that you've correctly checksum, backed it up, QC'd all of your footage as you usually would when offloading footage. If you're on a production, make sure you've got your wipe report or wipe clearance so that you can format the data on the card. And all you need to do is delete the digital magazine bin and the digital mag dynamic bin. So we're going to go ahead and delete those now. Going to empty my trash can. And that's all we need to do. So now I'm going to switch back to my camera menus, and we're now going to mount that into the camera, and we'll see what happens. So I'm just going to be unplugging my card here. Sorry if you heard the unmount sound there. I'm now going to mount this in the camera. And hopefully if I've done this correctly, as we now mount the card, the format card dialog box will instantly come up, and we won't have to go into the menus like we usually have to. So I'll just wait for that to kind of ping up. And any moment here. There we go. And instantly the format dialog box has popped up. So whenever an AC mounts the card, they know 100% that card is good to format. So there's no confusion. I've had it a few times where an AC's mounted a card and something's happened. They've gone, oh, is there footage on this? I've had to run in and go, let me check this quickly. And I know it's been fine to format. And it's, just that thing that speeds the process up on set and makes it more efficient. So we'll just format this card. Right then. Now on to the next tip. So this is a cool one. So hotkeys and soft keys. This is something I love playing with from job to job. And we've got a little pre-recorded video from Clay, our in-house filmmaker, who's talked about one of the hotkeys that he really likes to set up. So I'll just play that for you now.
From Red, and this is my daily driver. It's a DSMC2 Monstro 8K VV camera. And today I'm going to show you how to set up a hotkey for pre-record. Now, if you're not sure what pre-record is, you should check out my Red Tech video about it on Red's YouTube channel. Select Menu, Settings, Setup, Keys, Key Mapping. Now press the button you want to map. I use SSD user button 1, use the selection bar to assign the pre-record function, and boom, you're ready to roll. Now, you don't have to assign pre-record or even use SSD user button 1. The possibilities for customization are endless. This is just a tool I use every time I shoot documentary or action sports. It helps me so that I don't fill up my mags too fast, and also so that I'm ready to roll anytime without any question over whether I'm in pre-record or regular record. One final note, remember to initiate a secure format before you use pre-record for the long-term health of your mags. Thanks for watching, and keep creating out there.
So huge shout out to Clay for shooting that little video for me just to show off some of the ways that he likes to set his camera up. You may have seen that on our YouTube channel or through one of our newsletters that went out recently. Oh, I need to go to my menu view. There we go. So what we're going to look at here is some of the use cases for some of the hotkeys, which are the physical buttons on the camera, and some of the soft keys, which are overlays on top of the screen. So you get 4 additional software keys either side of the monitor, and there's a couple of really cool use cases which I'll show you in a moment for that. So we'll firstly just dive in. We'll go in through setup, and one thing I'll show you here is something called breadcrumbs. So you'll notice that when I'm going into menus, the camera is remembering where I last was. So if you went into a menu, changed something, and go, oh no, actually I didn't mean to do that, you can very quickly dive back into that same menu because of these little breadcrumbs. Just a little thing to note there. So key mapping. So as Clay said, he loves mapping his pre-record to a separate button so that he can still have his record button if he needs to fire off a quick shot. If he's waiting for an athlete to perform a trick, he can trigger the pre-record, save media. When the trick happens, cut the recording, and then maybe wait for a little bit. Oh no, now there's a crazy reaction going on. Start recording. You haven't got to go through that pre-record trigger and start recording. So this is something that you really should dive into. There's a whole big list here. There's a massive list of everything you can go through. So if there's something you particularly dive into a lot, definitely go check this area out and see what's kind of away in these menus. But some of the ones I like to use, I'll just dive through quickly. I love to go and have my sensor calibration as a hotkey. So if we're moving from a interior stage that's quite warm to an exterior that's pretty cold here in the UK, I know obviously in the States and other countries it's flipped the other way. And that way I can flip to our external black shade and our internal black shade relatively quickly. I've then also got things like secure format. So I like to have a quick button that I can secure format a card really quickly should I want to. I like to do that quite frequently to ensure longevity on the health of the cards. So we'll just back out of there and I will show you something that I've started doing quite recently with my presets. So I'll build a preset for 16:9. And as social media and that vertical filmmaking, as much as some of us would love to suppress it, we are getting a lot of that 9:16. So I've basically built 2 presets, one that is only changing to 16:9 and one that is only changing to 9:16. So maybe we're on a shoot, we're shooting our 16:9 content, and there's a specific scene or shot that requires a 9:16 frame. This way, an operator or myself or the DP can really quickly and easily navigate to that without having to go build it, set it up, do all the pixel mapping, those kind of things. So I'll just show you that now. So we're here in our 16:9, and as I tap my preset button, which I've just done now, we've now instantly overlaid our 9:16. Now to create this, we're going to go through creating frame lines, overlays, and actually saving these in camera in the next session, because we kind of want to keep these relatively short. We'll really go in depth on that session, which is just showing you the power of what you can do with these hotkeys. And I can then just simply press it back, and now we're going back to our normal 16:9. So we're now going to go into our settings and look at the soft keys. Now, soft keys are my personal favorites. I really like these because I don't really like assigning hotkeys to buttons that make substantial changes to the image, because on a lot of jobs that I've been on, those cameras are getting thrown around between location moves, they're getting knocked around, those kind of things. And I don't want something that's going to ultimately impact the image to be kind of applied during a move or during a take. So, you know, things like frame lines, that's not really going to ruin a take. Yeah, maybe for one take, someone's accidentally put some frame lines on. That's not the end of the world. Someone's gone into a menu, they can close that. But somebody who might apply a LUT or a completely different frame rate, that's a little bit more of a pain. So what I've done here is on the left-hand side, I've built a load of presets where the only thing that's changing is the lookup table. So this might be your show LUT. You might have an interior day, night interior, day exterior, night exterior, and you want to flip between those all relatively quickly without having to dive into menus to change a lookup table. So I've got my no LUT, I've got ST4, I've got one of Phil Holland's amazing LUTs, and I'll quickly show you how I've set that up. So I've gone into presets, and you will then go down to create, but I've already got a few made. So I'm going to Phil Holland's, one of his presets. And all you're doing is going into look. And the only thing you need to copy across is the creative 3D LUT. So once you've applied your LUT, come in here, create one, and that's the only thing through this arrow that we're saving into that preset. So no matter what other settings you've got applied, nothing else is being impacted. So if I now back out, I've now made that preset, and I've applied my different LUTs and made those different presets. We now go back into settings, setup, thanks to our breadcrumbs, into keys, and I've now got all of these LUTs applied in here, and I can toggle through the touchscreen really easy. And since I've been doing this, I've never run into an issue where somebody's accidentally enabled one of these or tapped them and we've loaded into some weird preset. So this is my personal preference of how I like to work, but you can more than do this on the hotkeys. I just like it as well because as you swipe in from the side, if you tap this button down here, show key actions as labels, it will show you the name of the preset. So the name of the LUT, the name of the setting you're going to go into. Because I also like to build in, so on Dark Crystal, we had multiple shooting aspect ratios. We had our 4K 1:1 anamorphic preset. We had spherical high speed, anamorphic high speed, in which for a dailies operator coming in, I can just say, hey, tap on the touchscreen and load that preset. They haven't got to go in the menus and go, okay, 4K, 120, shutter angle, make that change. It's all there done for them really, really easily. So they've got a really speedy experience of working with the camera. So super cool there. And we will now back out. And I think that's what I was going to be showing off for these modes. Yes, it is. So we'll now back out of there. And I'll show you one more cool little tip for saving menus and those kind of things. And you'll notice we've got these three little dots here at the top. So let's say we've got something that we don't access too frequently, but we like to be able to get in there relatively quickly. We don't want it as a soft key. We don't want it as a hotkey either. So if we say, let's come into audio and we change the preamp gain somewhat frequently. Press these three dots and then do map to shortcut. This dialog box comes up. Feel free to apply it to 1, 2, 3, or 4. We now apply that and we now back out. And you'll now see we've now got this kind of third level of menus that we can go into and save these shortcuts. So maybe the sensor flip mode on Monstro, that's one thing that we did in Dark Crystal, where when we were doing underslung Steadicam or we had lenses that were inverted, we can simply tap into that and invert it really, really quickly. So you'll see that I'm coming in and I've gone straight into that menu. So again, just making things, speeding them up, making them really quick. And I think we'll move on to, I think this is my final little tip here. Yes. So this is another one from our support team that I got suggested, is people ask a lot about recording audio in very speed. So the answer is yes, you can do that, but it's in a contextual menu. So I'll kind of run through that and show you that here. So if we go into settings, recording, and mode, this is where that option will come up. But as we're not in the very speed mode, it's a contextual menu, we're not going to see it. So if we back out and we now go into very speed, you'll see here, one thing that I've also done is I edit my lists. So before I get too distracted, I'll show you this and then we'll come back to my editable lists. When I'll come back, menu, thanks to the breadcrumbs, we'll get back there again. And you can see record very speed audio in separate WAV file. We turn that on and now we've got that WAV file. So when we're doing that ramping, we've got that file to get that super slow-mo sound, and we snap back into real time, we can go back into the audio that was recorded at the time of shooting. So we'll just disable that, and now we'll go back to what I was talking about here. So one thing that I really like to do is, say for example, we've got people who are coming in for the day on the camera, someone we're lending the camera to for a shoot, I like to kind of get rid of the things they don't need. So in terms of compression, I love to come in, edit my list, go to custom, clear all, and basically just enable the one that I need. Say I'm shooting just 6:1 for an entire job. That's the Netflix spec, let's say. Hey, I'm just going to enable that, and then anyone who comes into here isn't going to accidentally set me to 22:1 compression. Same goes for frame rates. Maybe I've got a set amount of frame rates that I work within, 25 to 75. There's no 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. I've seen some people do it similar with their white balance, where they'll just have the key values, so 5.6, 4.2, 3.2, and maybe some other variants in there, just to kind of speed up and make that process a little bit more easy for how they want to work. And I think we will now open it up to some questions from you guys. So I've seen that I've had a couple of follow-ups from James in my chat. So I've never managed to set hotkeys for changing frame rates. So in terms of assigning hotkeys, so if we dive into the hotkeys, if we go into settings, setup, keys, key mapping. Now, depending on which modules and accessories you've got, so for example, on SSD user button 1, which Clay had for his pre-record, I've got my geoscope toggle. We can come in, and depending on what's in there, so let's see what we've got. So you can have things like ISO, incremental up and down. If it's in the list, you can obviously set it up through here. If you like to change your frame rate and what was it in there, and your shutter, make some presets or some lists just with that in it. So let's just see. I can't type it in because otherwise I'll lose control through here. Dialog box, where's the ISO? There is an incremental up and down in here. So much to go to, and this is what I really like. I like kind of really going in and seeing, hey, do I actually go into my lens settings enough? Oh, yeah, I do actually. I'm going to enable that. Here we go. So shutter speed, increase and decrease. So basically, you'll need to use two buttons for this. So you've got to have, so potentially on the side of your monitor, you may have your monitor 1 and your monitor 2. Just make sure that you have one is increase and the other is decrease. So they are in there, they are easy to then set up as a result. I've got a second question coming in. For example, 25 FPS 8K and switching to 100 FPS in 6K. Yes, this is an exact reason for that. You can quickly go from 8K to 6K high speed and not have to go through like we would here. So if we come out, oh no, obviously I'm on the Gemini. We haven't got to go into 4K, and then we've got to let that load up. And then I've got to go over to my frame rate. Got to tap over here. Let's go to frame rate. Let's go to 120. And then I've got to change my shutter angle. So you can have this preset already built and configured for you. So now I've got to 120. That took a couple of seconds. Whereas you can have it in an instant by just diving straight into that preset by having them all pre-configured. And yes, it may take a little bit of time, but it's going to save you on the shoot a whole bunch of time, which is going to add up and just make that process of working with the camera for somebody who maybe isn't familiar, or for even an experienced shooter, just to make sure you always get that shot. So I'll just come out of this mode again. Let's go back to 5K. And I'm just going to look over to my chat now and just kind of see what's going on. Looks like my mods are keeping you guys all in check, so that's good. Where are the soft keys on the screen? So basically, to access the soft keys on the screen, you basically swipe in from the side. So if I come over here, you see swipe in from the side, and the same goes to the other side. Sorry, my range is a little bit far away from me there. So you can see I've just gone in from the other side there. Swipe in, and you can tap on any of the other modes. So I just go into my S35 mode. So on Monstro, obviously 6K is the equivalent of an S35 sensor, or about 2% larger than helium. And I've just instantly gone into my S35 mode there. So maybe I've got my full frame lenses, but I've got some really bespoke, unique S35 glass I like to use a lot. Hey, I've got my full frame preset and my S35 preset that I can jump into really, really quickly. Hey, now let's go back to full frame. Let's utilize the full image circle of the Zeiss lens. Oh, let's come out to 75 FPS here. And you can see that it's all loading up really, really quickly. So it's not something that's going to hold you up when you're shooting. In terms of setting them up, sorry, just to reiterate, I know we had one more question that was about the magnify, so I will loop back through that quickly. So we're going into settings, setup, keys, and over into soft keys. And that's where you can assign any preset or even anything in there. So there's a huge big list in there as well of things that you can set up. So let's loop back around to our magnify again. So obviously, as we said at the start, magnify typically will punch in. So on this camera, I've got my monitor set to user button 1, so we can magnify in, but this is going into the center. So just to reiterate very quickly, if you want to be able to move that, we're going to use another feature of the camera to kind of get us that functionality. So menu, settings, focus, and just enable that manual confirm, spot and small, confirm style to none. We then get this little box that comes up, and then you can move that around. Show how to use magnify and edge. Oh, okay, fantastic. Okay, so one thing that we could do is you could map multiple buttons to help you out there. So I'll back out of this. We'll go into settings, setup, keys. So for my key mapping, at the top here, I've got my magnify toggle. And if I come down to my second button, I've got the exposure toggle. So what I could do is I could come in and where is my edge detect going to be? Can I find this on stream? Because usually I would just type this in, exposure toggle. Can I find this in a reasonable amount of time? Edge, edge, edge. Let's not do that. We'll back out. So we can do our magnify and come into overlays. So we'll do tools. We'll come down to edge detect, enable edge, and we're just going to tap our magnify, and then we're going to utilize both of those tools at the same time. So we can see, hey, look at that. I want that R just in focus. Oh, actually, no, I want the R, the ER on the end in focus. And obviously, if we need more, let's open up our iris and get a slightly deeper depth of field. So that's how you can kind of use both together. But again, it's much easier when you're on the touch screen because you can just type in edge. But because I'm using the side handle and I want menus to come out through HDMI, that's a little bit of a caveat there. So let's just come out of our magnify toggle. And how do you see a clean full screen image on your Red without all the menus? Okay, so to set that up, if we just turn all this off. So if you want a clean feed going out to your producer, we've got to come into our monitors. So for this instance, I'm using HDMI to output the menus to my screen here. But for here, what you would do is you come into mode and simply set it to clean. That will have nothing on the screen. It'll be a completely clean feed for anyone that you want to view it. Now, in the next session, what we're going to look at is building these really unique overlays that will give us important bits of information about the settings in the camera, the lens that's being used as well. Sometimes that's great for the DIT to make sure, hey, what lens are they on? Positional movement in terms of pan, VFX, that can be useful for them as well. And also the roll and date and amount of left on the card as well. So we'll go into that in the next session. This area itself, where we're in now, is really powerful as well. And just to reiterate, if you don't want any tools to come up on that external feed, just come in and disable tools. So none of the magnify, none of the exposure tools or the false color modes will come through there. Just go back to the chat to see what's coming in. Any other comments? Any mods that have any questions, please feel free to ping them to me. But I think... What is the control preamp gain button? Okay. So the control preamp gain is a shortcut that you can set through the camera. So if, say we frequently come in and change our preamp gain, so the internal speakers in the camera, or maybe we through the 3.5mm headphone jack, we've got sound coming in. If we want to change those levels really quickly, we can set a map shortcut. So basically, when you're in a menu setting that you like or go into frequently, but not enough to assign a menu, come in here, map to shortcut, and we've assigned this menu breadcrumb, I guess you could say, the shortcut 1. Let's say we've got another one where maybe we come into the power and we like to go into power save somewhat frequently. We can come in, map to shortcut. We can map that in there again, and we're starting to build this really nice little list of things that we dive into. About the LUTs in camera. So you can load LUTs into the camera. So I've got a big old list of lookup tables, copied over here. So go on to red.com/downloads, and right down at the very bottom there is a list of creative LUTs, which we developed with the colorist on Mindhunter. So these are really, really powerful LUTs, giving you lots of really unique looks to help you establish a look. Also check out Phil Holland's LUT package. I've got one of them here. The Shoveler is one that a lot of people really like. And just ensure, I won't dive too much into IPP2 here, but the LUT that you're using, if it has a Rec. 709 transform in IPP2, because the output color space has that already set, you may get a double LUT. Now, I'll dive into that in an IPP2 session, which is coming, but just to be aware. And if you've got a LUT from a previous job or some time back, if you want to use a LUT that's got that, just go into Legacy and assign red, white, gamma, RGB, and log3G10. But I don't want to confuse too many people at this stage. So there we go. Simply applying that very easily. So I hope that answers your question there. And now I'm just going to go straight back to IPP2. How to set a shortcut for a clear screen. So for auto hiding menus. Okay, fantastic. So if you want to clear everything off the screen, so if we go into monitoring, monitors, HDSDI or HDMI, just simply go into auto hide menus. And when you're not using them, so you'll basically have to tap on the screen. So actually, if I set this up on this camera quickly, just because it'll be a bit easier to show you. Menu, monitoring, monitors, and I am on LCD EVF left. Then all you do is just do auto hide menus, and they will, oh, I'm on the wrong one there. Monitoring, LCD left, there we go, that makes sense. And then when you're not using the menus, they will disappear. So you can have a clean overlay on your output monitor, and then you tap to get those to come back. So tap to go away, tap to come back, and we can dive straight into our menus and be working with them as we would. Does Phil Holland's LUT work in IPP2 in Rec. 709? Yes, they do. If Phil's here, I'm sure he can chime in, but they are developed for IPP2. But I think that is going to round off this session quite nicely. I think kind of that 40-minute mark is quite nice. If you've got any follow-up questions, please email us at there's a link down below, solitaryseries@red.com. And also send us an email with how you've configured your Red camera. We'd love to hear how you've configured any hotkeys or presets that you've used, and any of the cool ones. We'll try and feature them in the next episode when we dive in and actually build a preset from scratch. So thank you everyone for tuning in. Any questions, obviously let us know. Stay creative, stay safe, and I'll see you guys soon.
We are also very fortunate this day and age, as there is so much great camera choices out there in the marketplace. So why did I choose Red? Look, at the end of the day I need a workhorse, something that won't let me down, and it has to tick as many of my boxes as possible. What I use day to day has to fall into three major categories. Image quality being number one. It has to be easy to use, on set and all the way through the post-production process. Third is size and weight. I've never been emotionally connected to brand names or logos. I've just jumped between cameras my whole working career. Always in search of something that can deliver a better image in the least time possible. So my reason for using Red cameras is purely logical. Speed and performance are the two things that will give me a creative edge. It's as simple as that. For me, image quality is everything. Some say resolution is not important, but for me it is. I shot a lot of 10x8" film in my photography days, which was probably and still is the ultimate in resolution. Having all that resolution gave me so many options to reframe and resize, with no worries about grain. And yes, the lens had to perform as well, or the resolution was wasted. 8K resolution allows me to push in 100, 200% and reframe. It's like having 2 or 3 lenses on the same camera during the same take. The more resolution and deep data there is in the raw container, the more dynamic range I have, meaning the more colour grading choices I have, meaning the less noise there is. It's simple schoolboy math. You can't argue the science, even though people love to try. I realised many years ago back in my film days that lenses dictate the overall look, density, sharpness, contrast, mixed in with distortion and flares and colour aberrations. You can push and pull all you want in the colouring suite, but you're never going to change a lens's optical look or character. So for me, that's where the look comes from. So if you're after a cinematic look, you have to use a lens that gives you that look. The red sensor will capture all the information and more so, but only you ultimately decide on that final look. This is why I collect so many lenses, and I'm always on the lookout for more. They're all artist brushes at the end of the day. There is no such thing as a bad lens. The camera itself is as easy to use as an iPhone. Actually, it's easier. Actually, you can operate the whole bloody camera on an iPhone. But really, it's as easy as this. Turn the camera on. Frame rate adjust. Color temperature adjust. Focus. Press record. It's seriously that simple. There's something in there for everyone's needs. Anyone that says red cameras are difficult to use obviously haven't used one. It's not rocket science. Overall, red has made my shooting life so much easier. I'm actually getting quite lazy with exposure and colour settings these days, only because I don't live in a colour-baked world anymore. In my 35mm days, I had to be like spot on with everything, but now I'm in a raw world, meaning I can change all that information later. If I'm in a rush trying to capture a performance or a shot that I could lose any second, or I've completely disregarded the colour temperature and I'm underexposed a couple of stops, all sorts of things can go down. But I don't really worry at all. There is so much latitude in the raw file that I can easily retrieve my desired look. Framing and capturing the perfect shot is more important to me. I do a lot of visual effects work. 3D tracking can be an absolute bastard on noisy shots, and doing chroma key work can be an absolute pain in the ass also. But the 8K resolution makes it so much easier. And honestly, if I couldn't do any of this on a laptop, the deal would be over. But I can. I change my rigs nearly every shoot. One day I'm shooting a feature film, the next one I'm shooting a TV ad, then I may send the camera underwater, then I'm putting it on a tracking arm or in a helicopter or hanging off a drone, and then the next day I'm on some round-the-world junket shooting handheld out of a backpack. I have no idea what my next job is, but I know I can configure my red camera to adapt to most things I throw at it. Being able to edit, resize, reframe and grade 8K RAW all in real time is an absolute godsend for me, as it gives me so much extra spare time to be more creative. At the end of the day, the camera I choose needs to be a Swiss Army knife. But irrespective of how good my tools may be, content will always be king. But you need great tools to capture great content, and that's why I've chosen red. Have a great day, everyone.